I've never been the type of guy to buy flowers. Not because I'm cheap or unromantic. Linda, my wife of 30 years, always insisted she hated them. Waste of money, she'd say, waving her hand dismissively. Get me something useful instead. And I respected that. Hell, I appreciated it. As a mechanic, I've always preferred practical things myself. That's why the roses caught my eye that Tuesday morning. Fresh red roses in a crystal vase on our kitchen counter, their perfume filling the room. I stood there, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, staring at them like they were some alien object that had materialized overnight. "Oh, those?" Linda said when I asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Sarah from work had her birthday yesterday. Gave everyone flowers from the party." She busied herself with the dishes, her back to me. I nodded, though something felt off. Linda's never brought work party flowers home before. I let it go. We had our routine after all. Every morning I'd get up at 6, kiss her goodbye, and head to the garage I've owned for the past 20 years. She'd go to her job at the private clinic where she's been the office manager for over a decade. We'd have dinner together, watch some TV, go to bed. Simple, stable, exactly how we liked it. But a week later, there were lilies, pure white, elegant, expensive looking. This time she mentioned some patient bringing flowers to thank the staff. The week after that, it was orchids, a retirement party apparently. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something made me check the trash that night. Under some papers I found the wrapping, not from the local florist where Sarah or the clinic staff would shop, but from Belmont and Rose, that fancy place downtown where a single stem costs more than an hour of my labor. That night I lay awake beside Linda, listening to her steady breathing, my mind racing. 30 years of marriage teaches you things, like how your wife's voice changes slightly when she's not telling the whole truth, or how she hasn't actually said "I love you" first in how long now? The next morning I started counting days between new bouquets, started noting when she worked late, started paying attention to all the little things I'd been too busy or too trusting to notice before. And slowly, like rust spreading under fresh paint, a pattern began to emerge. They say ignorance is bliss. But sometimes it's the smallest things, like flowers that shouldn't be there, that crack open the door to truths you've been blind to. And once you start seeing them, you can't look away. It's funny how your whole world can shift on a Wednesday afternoon. I was taking out the trash, something I'd done thousands of times before, when I saw it. A crumpled receipt from Belmont and Rose, partially visible under some coffee grounds. My hands shook slightly as I smoothed it out. Buyer, Eric Hendrickson. Item, premium rose arrangement. Date, last Thursday, the day Linda worked late. I stood there in our backyard, heart pounding, that piece of paper burning in my hands like a live wire. Eric Hendrickson. The name meant nothing to me, but it meant something to my wife, enough for him to spend $85 on flowers she supposedly hated. I went back inside, moved on autopilot to our bedroom. Linda was still at work, another late night at the clinic. With mechanical precision, I opened her dresser drawer. Nothing unusual. Checked under the neatly folded sweaters. Clean. Her phone was with her, of course, and her laptop was password protected. But now I had something concrete. A name. That night, Linda came home around 8, bringing the scent of fresh flowers with her. I watched her arrange white lilies in our crystal vase, her movements precise and practiced. How many times had she done this before I started noticing? "Beautiful flowers," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Someone's birthday again?" "Oh, just brightening up the office," she replied, not turning around. "They were on sale." "Lieutenant?" The receipt in my pocket proved that. I watched her back as she arranged the flowers, this woman I'd known for 3 decades, or thought I knew. Every stem she touched felt like another small betrayal. "You always said you hated flowers," I remarked. She paused just for a fraction of a second. "People change, Harry. Sometimes they discover new things they like." Yeah, I thought, like Eric Hendrickson. That night, I started a log in my phone, dates, times, flowers, every late night, every excuse, every new bouquet. If Linda was playing a game, I needed to learn the rules, and I needed to win. The next week crawled by like a wounded animal. Every morning I'd kiss Linda goodbye, my lips touching the cheek of a stranger. Every night I'd watch her check her phone, noting how she'd angle it away from me. The flowers on our counter seemed to mock me, their sweet scent turning my stomach. I started doing research during slow hours at the garage. Eric Hendrickson. The name pulled up a LinkedIn profile, CEO of some tech consulting firm. His profile picture showed a guy, maybe 5 years younger than me, with perfect teeth and a tailored suit that probably cost more than I make in a month. The kind of man who shops at Belmont and Rose without checking price tags. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that felt like swallowing broken glass. It was remembering 30 years of Linda refusing flowers from me. "They're just going to die anyway," she'd say. Such a waste. All those anniversaries when I respected her wishes, bought practical gifts instead. And now here she was, accepting weekly bouquets from a man who probably couldn't change his own oil. One afternoon I drove past her clinic during lunch. There she was, getting into an unfamiliar Mercedes. She was laughing, that full-bodied laugh I hadn't heard in years. The man opening the door for her was wearing a suit that matched his LinkedIn photo. I gripped my steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, but I didn't follow them. Instead, I went back to my garage and changed the oil on Mrs. Peterson's Toyota, my movements automatic while my mind churned. Each twist of the wrench felt like tightening a bolt on my own control. I needed that control, needed to think clearly. That evening, Linda came home late again. "Traffic was terrible," she said, not meeting my eyes. Her lips were slightly swollen, her blouse buttoned wrong. The lie hung between us like poison gas, but I just nodded and asked what she wanted for dinner. I was learning patience, learning to watch. Every flower, every late night, every small deception, they were all pieces of a puzzle I was slowly assembling. And when the picture was complete, I'd be ready. After 3 weeks of watching and waiting, I finally broke. Not on the outside, I kept that carefully controlled mask in place. But inside, something snapped when I found her clinic appointment book left open in her car while she asked me to grab her forgotten phone. Right there, every Thursday, 2 p.m., EH consultation. I sat in her car, staring at those innocent-looking initials until my vision blurred. Every Thursday. The same day fresh flowers appeared in our house. The same day she came home late, smelling of perfume she didn't wear to work. That night, after Linda went to bed, I pulled out the calendar where I'd been tracking everything. Lined up the dates, the flower deliveries, the consultations. The pattern was so obvious it felt like a slap in the face. 30 years of marriage reduced to a weekly schedule of betrayal. I drove to Belmont and Rose the next morning. The bell chimed as I entered, and a young woman smiled from behind the counter. "How can I help you?" "I was wondering about the arrangements you've been sending to the Princeton Medical Clinic," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "The weekly ones?" "Oh, Mr. Hendrickson's orders," she brightened. "He's one of our best customers. Always picks the premium roses for his special someone. Would you like to place a similar order?" The confirmation hit like a punch to the gut, but I managed to smile. "Actually, yes. I'd like exactly the same arrangement he orders. Could you help me with that?" As she pulled up the details, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose, a direction. Linda thought she was so clever with her flower-coated affair, her Thursday consultations, but she'd forgotten something important about me. I fix things for a living. When something's broken, I don't just walk away. I diagnose the problem, gather my tools, and then I make things right. Walking out of that flower shop, holding the receipt for next week's delivery, I felt almost calm. For the first time since this started, I had more than just suspicions. I had certainty. And with certainty came clarity. Let Linda have her Thursday flowers. Soon enough, she'd learn that every rose has its thorns. The thing about being a mechanic is that you learn to be methodical. You don't just dive in and start yanking parts out. That's how you end up with a bigger mess than what you started with. You diagnose, you plan, you prepare your tools. Most importantly, you understand the whole system before you start taking it apart. That's exactly how I approached my situation with Linda. The next few days, I immersed myself in gathering intelligence. I created a spreadsheet, something I hadn't done since high school, tracking every detail. Meeting times, flower deliveries, her excuses, even the changes in her behavior. The patterns emerged like a diagnostic readout. I started with her phone. Linda had always been careful with it, but now I noticed she'd added a fingerprint lock. Fortunately, she still used our anniversary as her backup pin. Probably thought it was a clever bit of irony. One night, while she was in the shower, I installed a tracking app. Modern problems, modern solutions. The GPS data told me everything. Every Thursday, she'd leave the clinic at 1:45 p.m., drive to the Westbrook Hotel downtown, and stay for exactly 2 hours. Then she'd head back to work, stopping at home first to arrange her weekly flowers. The precision of it was almost admirable. Almost. I also dug deeper into Eric Hendrickson. LinkedIn was just the start. His company's website showed him speaking at conferences, always wearing those expensive suits, always with that perfect smile. He was married too. His wife appeared in several charity gala photos, looking exactly like you'd expect a CEO's wife to look. I wondered if she noticed any suspicious charges from flower shops. The more I learned, the colder and clearer my thoughts became. This wasn't just about catching them anymore. This was about justice. But not the hot-blooded, confrontational kind. That's for amateurs. No, I wanted something more elegant, something that would make the punishment fit the crime. I started visiting Belmont and Rose regularly, becoming friendly with Jenny, the florist. She was young, chatty, and had no idea she was helping me piece together my wife's affair. I learned that Eric always ordered the same arrangement. Premium romance package, $85. Always paid with the same credit card. Always with a little handwritten note that Jenny would transcribe. "He's so romantic," she gushed one day, writing those beautiful messages every week. I smiled, thinking about those notes Linda must have been hiding. What kind of things does he write? Oh, you know, sweet things, missing you already, counting the hours, that sort of stuff. Last week it was, every Thursday feels like forever. That's when the plan started taking shape. The flowers had been their secret code, their little system of signals and promises. It seemed fitting to use that same system to bring it all crashing down. I started making preparations. First, I opened a new credit card, one Linda didn't know about. Then I began studying Eric's handwriting from the business documents I found online. I practiced copying it during slow hours at the garage, between oil changes and tire rotations. My hands were rough from years of mechanical work, but they could be precise when they needed to be. Most importantly, I worked on my patience. Every time I saw Linda check her phone and smile, every time she came home with that post-hotel glow, I reminded myself, a good mechanic never rushes a job. You take your time, you do it right. And when you're done, everything works exactly the way it's supposed to. The hardest part wasn't gathering evidence or planning the revenge. The hardest part was living with Linda, watching her play the role of devoted wife, while I knew the truth. Every morning kiss felt like swallowing poison. Every "I love you" sounded like the punchline of a cruel joke. But I learned to use that pain, channel it. Like converting engine heat into useful energy, I transformed each stab of betrayal into fuel for my plan. I started taking more detailed notes about Eric's routine. The GPS tracker showed Linda's regular visits to the Westbrook, but I needed more. So I spent a few lunch breaks watching the hotel. Sure enough, every Thursday at 1:30 p.m., that silver Mercedes would pull into the parking garage. Clockwork. One particular Thursday, I followed him before his meeting with Linda, watched him stop at Belmont and Rose, spend exactly 12 minutes selecting and paying for flowers. Then to a high-end coffee shop where he bought 2 lattes, one regular, one vanilla soy, Linda's favorite. The detail hit me like a wrench to the gut. He even knew how she took her coffee. I kept my distance, but I noticed things. How he checked his wedding ring before entering the hotel, then slipped it off in the lobby. How he'd scan the area before getting in the elevator. Amateur moves, really. The kind of things you'd expect from someone who's never had to really hide anything in his life. During my surveillance, I also started laying groundwork at the garage, telling my employees about Linda's recent health issues, explaining why I might need to take some personal time soon, building my alibi piece by piece like assembling an engine. Every component had to fit perfectly. The GPS data provided more than just locations. It showed patterns. Every Monday, she'd visit her sister Beth. Every Wednesday, yoga class. Except there was no yoga class. The location data showed her at a small cafe 3 blocks from Eric's office. More lies. More pieces for my puzzle. I started recording everything. Phone calls, conversations at dinner, her excuses for being late. Not for divorce court. I had something much better in mind. Each recording was another part of the mechanism I was building, a machine designed for one specific purpose. The next phase involved social engineering. I began dropping casual mentions of Linda's work stress to our friends. How concerned I was about her long hours, how grateful I was for her dedication to her job, building a narrative, laying foundations for what was to come. I also started making anonymous cash deposits into a new account. Small amounts, nothing suspicious. Like Linda, I was learning to cover my tracks. Unlike Linda, I was doing it right. Jenny at the flower shop became an unwitting ally. I'd stop by, chat about arrangements, learn more about Eric's ordering habits. She even showed me their order system one day, including all the delivery instructions he'd left. The level of detail in his planning would have been impressive if it wasn't so damning. "You know what's funny?" Jenny said one day. "Mr. Hendrickson always insists on our premium roses, says his lady won't accept anything less." I smiled, thinking about all those times Linda called flowers a waste of money. Some people just deserve the best, don't they? That night, watching Linda arrange her latest bouquet, I felt almost calm. The pain was still there, but it had transformed into something else, something cold and precise, like the edge of a perfectly sharpened tool. Soon, very soon, I'd put that tool to use. Because I'd learned something important during my weeks of preparation. The best revenge isn't just about hurting someone, it's about justice, about making them face their own lies. And I was building something beautiful, a machine of truth that would strip away every comfortable deception they'd wrap themselves in. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is how long you need to keep it on ice. 6 weeks of surveillance, planning, and preparation had crystallized my rage into something sharp and precise. Now it was time to start the endgame. I began by calling our friends, one by one. Casual conversations, nothing suspicious. "Hey, I'm thinking of throwing a surprise dinner party for Linda next Thursday. She's been working so hard lately." Most of them agreed immediately. Linda was well liked in our social circle, the perfect administrator's wife who always remembered birthdays and organized neighborhood gatherings. Next came the trickier part. I visited Belmont and Rose one last time, but not for surveillance. This time, I was there to place an order. "The premium romance package," I told Jenny, "exactly like Mr. Hendrickson's usual order." She beamed. "Of course. Would you like a similar message too?" I handed her a note I'd prepared, written in a careful imitation of Eric's handwriting. "Linda, every moment with you is precious. Can't wait for our special time together. Same place, same time. Your secret admirer." The beauty of it? I scheduled the delivery for Wednesday, the day before their regular meeting. A small deviation in their perfect routine, but enough to create chaos in their carefully orchestrated dance. That night, I set up the final pieces. I printed out all the GPS records, the flower shop receipts, the hotel parking timestamps, made copies of Linda's fake yoga class schedule and her real locations, organized everything in a neat folder, not for confrontation, but for exhibition. I also prepared our dining room, bought a new tablecloth, arranged for catering, even ordered a bottle of Linda's favorite wine. Everything had to be perfect. After all, this wasn't just revenge. It was theater. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. At breakfast, I kissed Linda goodbye like always. Listened to her talk about work, about her plans for Thursday afternoon. Might be late again, she said, not meeting my eyes. Big client meeting. No problem, I replied, buttering my toast. Just don't forget we're having friends over for dinner Thursday night. She paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Thursday? I might have to reschedule that client. Oh, don't worry about it, I said smoothly. Your meeting's at 2, right? Dinner won't be until 7. Plenty of time. The flash of panic in her eyes was almost imperceptible. Almost. That evening, I made one final call to Eric's wife. Not to tell her anything, just to invite her to dinner. Linda's been mentioning how she'd love to have you both over. I lied smoothly. Thursday at 7? She accepted graciously, probably thinking it was just another business networking opportunity. After all, her husband's client's husband was reaching out. How nice. How normal. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of peace. Everything was in place. The trap was set. All the weeks of pain, of watching, of planning, they were about to pay off. I went to bed that night next to Linda, listening to her pretend to sleep. Tomorrow, her weekly flowers would arrive early. Tomorrow, the first crack would appear in their perfect affair. And the day after that, well, the day after that would be a Thursday to remember. Some people think revenge is about passion, about letting your rage drive you. But real revenge, that's about precision, about timing, about watching all your carefully placed dominoes fall one by one until there's nothing left standing. Wednesday morning dawned like any other day. I left for work early, but not before setting up a small security camera in our living room, the kind we sell at the garage for people's cars. I wanted to see her reaction to the flowers, needed to see it. The delivery came at 10:30 a.m. I watched it all unfold on my phone during my lunch break, between fixing a transmission and rotating tires. The doorbell. Linda answering in her workout clothes. She'd taken to working from home on Wednesdays, her confused smile at the familiar Belmont and Rose packaging. Then she read the note. I've seen fear before, in customers facing massive repair bills, in drivers after near accidents. But I'd never seen fear like this on my wife's face. She actually dropped the flowers, the crystal vase shattering on our hardwood floor. Water and roses everywhere, like a crime scene. Her hands shaking, she pulled out her phone. 3 attempts to dial before she got it right. The call went straight to voicemail. Of course it did. Eric would be in meetings all morning. I knew his schedule better than she did at this point. Eric, she whispered urgently. The flowers came today. Why did they come today? Call me back immediately. Something's wrong. She paced our living room, carefully avoiding the scattered roses, making 5 more calls in the next hour. Each time, her voice grew more panicked. The last message was barely coherent. Around 1 o'clock, her phone finally rang. I couldn't hear his side of the conversation, but I could see her face. What do you mean you didn't send them? Her voice rose an octave. They're our flowers, our usual flowers. The note looked like your handwriting. She went quiet, listening. The color drained from her face. No, Harry doesn't suspect anything. He can't. We've been so careful. She swallowed hard. But someone knows. Someone's watching us. More listening. Her next words came out in a rush. Cancel tomorrow? But we never cancel. Harry's planning a dinner party anyway, I told you. It would look suspicious if I... She fell silent again, then nodded slowly. You're right. You're right. We should take a break. Just until we figure out who—" After hanging up, she just stood there, staring at the roses scattered across our floor. Then, with mechanical movements, she cleaned up the mess, picked up every petal, every shard of glass, wiped away every drop of water, trying to erase the evidence, just like she'd been doing for months. But she missed one rose petal hidden under the edge of the couch. I found it that evening when I got home, pressed it between the pages of my planning notebook, a small trophy, the first blood drawn in this quiet war. Linda was already in bed when I got home, claiming a migraine. I heard her tossing and turning all night, probably imagining who could have discovered their secret. Probably running through every possibility except the obvious one. Let her worry. Let her imagine mysterious stalkers and jealous co-workers. The fear would only make tomorrow's revelation sweeter. I lay beside her in the darkness, listening to her restless movements, and smiled. The first domino had fallen exactly as planned. Tomorrow at dinner, the rest would follow, and unlike Linda's precious flowers, there would be no cleaning up that mess. Thursday morning felt different. Maybe it was the way Linda's hands trembled as she poured her coffee, or how she kept checking her phone every few minutes. Maybe it was the knowledge that by tonight, everything would change. I watched her get ready for work, applying extra makeup to hide her sleepless night. She'd chosen her armor carefully, her expensive blue dress, the pearl necklace I'd given her for our 25th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. "About dinner tonight," she started, adjusting her earrings. "Maybe we should reschedule. I'm not feeling my best, and with work being so—" "Everything's arranged," I cut in smoothly. "Everyone's confirmed. Besides, you wouldn't want to disappoint Beth and Tom, and the Hendricksons are coming too?" The earrings she was fastening clattered to the floor. "The Hendricksons?" "Eric and his wife," I said, enjoying how her face went pale. "You mentioned wanting to get to know your clinic's clients better. Thought it would be nice to include them." She tried to cover her panic with a smile, but I saw her hands shaking as she retrieved the fallen earring. "Harry, I really don't think—" "It'll be fine," I assured her. "Just a casual dinner with friends, unless there's some reason you'd be uncomfortable." She couldn't meet my eyes. "No, of course not. I should get to work." After she left, I began my own preparations. First stop, the garage, where I handed over management to Mike for the evening, then to the caterers, confirming the delivery time. Everything had to be perfect. Back home, I set up my laptop in the study, connecting it to the TV in the dining room. A simple PowerPoint presentation, waiting to be unveiled. Nothing flashy, just dates, times, photos. Evidence presented in clean, irrefutable slides. I arranged the dining room with surgical precision, 8 place settings. Linda at one end, me at the other, Eric and his wife on opposite sides, where they'd have the best view of each other's reactions. The rest of our friends positioned strategically around the table, an audience for the performance to come. My phone buzzed throughout the day. Linda trying to find a way out. Client emergency coming up. Might have to work late. Maybe we should postpone. I responded to each message with calm reassurance. Everything was fine. Everyone was looking forward to it. No need to worry. Around 2 o'clock, I checked the GPS tracker. Linda's dot moved toward the clinic, then stopped. She wasn't heading to the Westbrook. For the first time in months, she was actually staying at work on a Thursday afternoon. Eric, it seemed, had chosen discretion over desire. Smart man. Too late, but smart. I spent the afternoon reviewing my notes one last time, every detail of their affair laid out in chronological order, every lie documented, every secret meeting time-stamped. I'd even calculated how much he'd spent on flowers, $2,380 over 7 months. The price of their betrayal counted in roses. At 5, I showered and dressed with the same care I'd use preparing for a complex repair job. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, the tie Linda had given me last Christmas. I wanted to look my best for what was coming. The caterers arrived at 6, setting up the appetizers and wine. I positioned the flowers, another premium romance arrangement from Belmont and Rose, in the center of the table, a final touch of poetry to the scene. By 6:30, everything was ready. The table set, the presentation loaded, the evidence folder placed casually by my seat. All the tools laid out, just waiting to be used. I poured myself a whiskey and watched the sun set through our living room window. Somewhere out there, Linda was probably sitting in her office, trying to figure out what I knew, what I'd planned. Somewhere, Eric was probably making excuses to his wife about tonight's dinner. Let them worry. Let them imagine the worst. The reality would be so much better. The guests started arriving at 6:45. Beth and Tom first, always punctual. Beth hugged me, commenting on how nice everything looked. If she noticed my tight smile, she didn't mention it. Linda arrived at 6:55, just ahead of the Wilsons. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the elaborate setup, lingering on the rose's centerpiece. I watched her recognize the arrangement, saw the slight tremor in her hands as she greeted our friends. "Beautiful flowers," Beth said, admiring the roses. "Harry, you've been holding out on us. Linda always said you never bought her flowers." "People change," I replied, echoing Linda's words from weeks ago. "Sometimes they discover new things they like." Linda's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. She knew those words, remembered when she'd said them. I saw the realization dawn in her eyes, that maybe yesterday's flowers hadn't been a coincidence, that maybe someone knew more than she thought. The Hendricksons arrived last at 7:05. Eric wore one of his expensive suits, his wife Sarah in a designer dress that probably cost more than a month's worth of his flower deliveries. I watched their entrance like a mechanic observing a failing engine, noting every sputter, every misfire. Eric's facade was good, I'll give him that. Professional smile, firm handshake. "Harry, thanks for having us." But I caught his quick glance at Linda, the microscopic flinch when he saw the roses on the table. Linda, for her part, was doing her best to appear normal, greeting Sarah with a warmth that must have felt like acid on her tongue, making small talk about the clinic, about Sarah's charity work. But her eyes kept drifting to the laptop connected to our TV, wondering what it might reveal. "Shall we sit?" I gestured to the table. Everyone found their place cards, another detail that seemed to unnerve Linda. She'd never known me to be this formal. I played the perfect host, pouring wine, encouraging conversation. On the surface, it was just another dinner party, but underneath, currents of tension swirled like oil beneath clear water. Eric barely touched his food. Linda kept smoothing her napkin, a nervous tell I'd noticed years ago. Between them, an entire silent conversation played out in avoided glances and careful distances. "Linda," Sarah smiled across the table, "Eric tells me you're one of their most valued clients at the clinic. Says he personally handles your consultations." I watched Linda's fork pause halfway to her mouth, watched Eric's knuckles whiten around his wine glass. "Yes," Linda managed. "Thursday afternoons, usually." "Not this Thursday, though," I added casually. "You had to cancel, didn't you? Something about yesterday's flowers throwing off your schedule?" The conversation around the table stuttered to a halt. Linda's face went pale. Eric's wife looked confused. "Flowers? Oh, you didn't know?" I reached for the remote control. "Let me show you something interesting about flowers. I've prepared a little presentation." The TV screen flickered to life. Linda half rose from her chair, then sank back down, as if her legs couldn't decide whether to run or fail completely. "Harry," she whispered, "please." I smiled the same smile I'd given her every morning while gathering evidence of her betrayal. "What's wrong, honey? I thought you'd started to appreciate flowers. Isn't that what you said? People change." The first slide appeared on the screen. A simple title, "A Story About Flowers." The gathering storm was about to break. The first slide filled the screen, a simple spreadsheet showing dates, times, and flower deliveries. Nothing dramatic, just cold, hard data. The kind of evidence that leaves no room for denial. "It's interesting," I said, standing at the head of the table, remote in hand, "how patterns emerge when you start paying attention. Take flowers, for example. Premium roses from Belmont and Rose, delivered every Thursday for the past 7 months." I clicked to the next slide, a collection of receipt images, each showing Eric's name, each showing the same amount, $85 premium romance package. "Harry!" Linda's voice shook. "This isn't—" "Let me finish, honey. I'm just getting to the good part." I clicked again. "See, I got curious about these Thursday deliveries, especially since you always said you hated flowers. Remember that, everyone? How Linda always said flowers were a waste of money?" Our friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Beth looked at her plate. Tom stared at his wine glass. Only Sarah Hendrickson kept her eyes forward, her face growing harder with each slide. But then I thought, maybe she just needed the right person to give them to her. Another click. GPS data appeared showing Linda's car at the Westbrook Hotel, timestamps, durations. Every Thursday, like clockwork, 2 hours at the Westbrook, then home to arrange her fresh flowers. Eric finally found his voice. "This is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let's talk about inappropriate, Eric. Let's talk about a man who spends $2,380 on flowers for another man's wife. Let's talk about Thursday consultations that never appear on the clinic's official schedule." I clicked through more slides. Hotel parking records, credit card statements, every piece of evidence laid out with mechanical precision. "Want to know the really interesting part?" I turned to Sarah, whose knuckles had gone white around her wine glass. "Your husband never varies his routine. Same flower shop, same hotel, same credit card. The kind of consistency that makes a mechanic's job easy, because in my line of work, patterns tell you everything you need to know about what's broken." Linda stood up suddenly, her chair scraping back. "Stop this, please." "Stop? But I haven't even shown everyone your reaction to yesterday's flowers yet." I pointed the remote at the screen. "I got it all on video. Want to see how panic looks on someone who's been caught?" The security camera footage began to play. Linda dropping the vase, her frantic phone calls, her fear laid bare for everyone to see. "Turn it off," Eric demanded, but his voice cracked. His perfect facade was crumbling, just like I'd planned. "Why?" I asked innocently. "Isn't this what you wanted? All those secret meetings, all those flowers? Wasn't it about being seen, being known? Well, now everyone knows. Isn't that better than hiding?" Sarah stood up silently, gathered her purse, and walked out. The front door closed with a quiet click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. "Sarah, wait!" Eric started to follow, but I wasn't done. "Sit down, Eric. We haven't even gotten to the best part yet." I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. After all, what kind of host would I be if I didn't share everything I've learned about my wife's Thursday afternoon consultant? The room had gone deathly quiet. Our friend sat frozen, caught between social propriety and morbid fascination. Beth looked like she wanted to disappear. Tom kept glancing at the door, probably calculating his escape route. But nobody moved. "You see," I continued, clicking to the next slide, "I got curious about our friend Eric here. CEO of a successful tech consulting firm, married to a lovely woman who just walked out, father of 2 kids in private school, man of routine and particular tastes." Eric's face had gone from red to white. "You investigated me?" "Investigation implies uncertainty. I simply observed, like how you always park in the same spot at the Westbrook, how you always buy 2 lattes before meeting Linda, 1 regular, 1 vanilla soy, how you take off your wedding ring in the hotel lobby but put it back on in the elevator on your way out. Details matter in my line of work. Linda's voice came out barely above a whisper. You followed us? No, honey, I followed him. You were too careful with your phone, your schedule. But Eric here? I gestured at the screen, now showing his daily routine mapped out in precise detail. He never thought anyone was watching. That's the thing about people who've never had to hide. They don't know how to do it properly. I pulled out a folder and started laying photos on the table. Eric entering the hotel, Eric at the flower shop, Eric and Linda in his car. Stop, Eric said, but there was no authority in his voice anymore, just fear. Why stop? Don't you want to explain to everyone how you spent $2,380 on flowers for my wife while your own wife got none? Or maybe you'd like to tell us about the other women. Linda's head snapped up. What? Oh, didn't you know? I smiled, though it felt like broken glass in my mouth. Turns out our Eric is quite the consultant. The Westbrook isn't just for Thursdays. He has a Tuesday regular too, and sometimes a Friday lunch meeting that runs surprisingly long. Eric stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You're lying. Like you lied to your wife? Like you lied to Linda? Like you both lied to me? My voice stayed calm, even as I felt the rage burning beneath it. I have it all documented. Every meeting, every flower delivery, every lie. Would you like to see the spreadsheet? I'm very thorough with my records. Linda had started crying silently, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Harry, please. Please what, Linda? Please don't tell everyone how you betrayed 30 years of marriage. Please don't show them how you laughed at me behind my back. Please don't reveal how you two thought you were so clever, so discreet. I clicked through more slides, their text messages, recovered from the phone bill records, the patterns of their meetings, the way they coordinated their stories. The flowers were a nice touch, by the way. A real power move, Eric, sending them to my house, making her display them right there on our kitchen counter. Did it give you a thrill, marking your territory in my home? That's enough. Eric moved toward the door, but I wasn't finished. Running away? Like you ran from your first wife? Oh, didn't anyone know about that? I did some very thorough research, found some interesting court records from Nevada. Seems our Eric has a pattern of office romances, though usually he trades up, not down. Linda flinched, as if I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel it. Let her understand exactly what she'd thrown away our marriage for. Your wife's lawyer will be interested in all this documentation, I added casually. I made copies, very detailed copies. I believe the phrase pattern of infidelity comes up quite a bit in divorce proceedings. Eric finally broke. You son of a bitch. He lunged forward, but Tom caught his arm. Probably for the best. I was past caring about consequences. No, Eric, you don't get to be angry. You don't get to be anything. You're just a man who buys overpriced flowers and thinks that makes him special. A man who can't even keep his story straight between his Tuesday girl and his Thursday afternoon distraction. I turned to Linda, who sat crumpled in her chair, all pretense of dignity gone. Was it worth it? Throwing away 30 years for someone who couldn't even be bothered to come up with original lies for each of his women. The room had gone deathly quiet. Our friend sat frozen, caught between social propriety and morbid fascination. Beth looked like she wanted to disappear. Tom kept glancing at the door, probably calculating his escape route. But nobody moved. You see, I continued, clicking to the next slide. I got curious about our friend Eric here, CEO of a successful tech consulting firm, married to a lovely woman who just walked out, father of 2 kids in private school, man of routine and particular tastes. Eric's face had gone from red to white. You investigated me? Investigation implies uncertainty. I simply observed, like how you always park in the same spot at the Westbrook, how you always buy 2 lattes before meeting Linda, 1 regular, 1 vanilla soy, how you take off your wedding ring in the hotel lobby but put it back on in the elevator on your way out. Details matter in my line of work. Linda's voice came out barely above a whisper. You followed us? No, honey, I followed him. You were too careful with your phone, your schedule. But Eric here? I gestured at the screen, now showing his daily routine mapped out in precise detail. He never thought anyone was watching. That's the thing about people who've never had to hide. They don't know how to do it properly. I pulled out a folder and started laying photos on the table. Eric entering the hotel. Eric at the flower shop. Eric and Linda in his car. Stop, Eric said, but there was no authority in his voice anymore, just fear. Why stop? Don't you want to explain to everyone how you spent $2,380 on flowers for my wife while your own wife got none? Or maybe you'd like to tell us about the other women? Linda's head snapped up. What? Oh, didn't you know? I smiled, though it felt like broken glass in my mouth. Turns out our Eric is quite the consultant. The Westbrook isn't just for Thursdays. He has a Tuesday regular too, and sometimes a Friday lunch meeting that runs surprisingly long. Eric stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. You're lying. Like you lied to your wife? Like you lied to Linda? Like you both lied to me? My voice stayed calm, even as I felt the rage burning beneath it. I have it all documented. Every meeting, every flower delivery, every lie. Would you like to see the spreadsheet? I'm very thorough with my records. Linda had started crying silently, mascara tracking down her cheeks. Harry, please. Please what, Linda? Please don't tell everyone how you betrayed 30 years of marriage. Please don't show them how you laughed at me behind my back. Please don't reveal how you two thought you were so clever, so discreet. I clicked through more slides, their text messages, recovered from the phone bill records, the patterns of their meetings, the way they coordinated their stories. The flowers were a nice touch, by the way. A real power move, Eric. Sending them to my house, making her display them right there on our kitchen counter. Did it give you a thrill, marking your territory in my home? That's enough. Eric moved toward the door, but I wasn't finished. Running away? Like you ran from your first wife? Oh, didn't anyone know about that? I did some very thorough research, found some interesting court records from Nevada. Seems our Eric has a pattern of office romances, though usually he trades up, not down. Linda flinched as if I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel it. Let her understand exactly what she'd thrown away our marriage for. Your wife's lawyer will be interested in all this documentation, I added casually. I made copies, very detailed copies. I believe the phrase pattern of infidelity comes up quite a bit in divorce proceedings. Eric finally broke. You son of a bitch. He lunged forward, but Tom caught his arm, probably for the best. I was past caring about consequences. No, Eric. You don't get to be angry. You don't get to be anything. You're just a man who buys overpriced flowers and thinks that makes him special. A man who can't even keep his story straight between his Tuesday girl and his Thursday afternoon distraction. I turned to Linda, who sat crumpled in her chair, all pretense of dignity gone. Was it worth it? Throwing away 30 years for someone who couldn't even be bothered to come up with original lies for each of his women? The aftermath of a bomb is always quieter than you'd expect. In the week following that Thursday dinner, silence filled our neighborhood like smoke. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors found reasons to cross the street when they saw me coming. Even my regular customers at the garage seemed uncomfortable, their small talk strained and careful. I stayed at Mike's place for 3 days, just like I'd said. When I came back to the house, Linda was gone. She'd taken her clothes, her jewelry, some photos, left everything else, including her wedding ring on the kitchen counter, right next to the roses, now brown and withered, their petals scattered like confetti after a sad party. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Linda didn't contest anything, didn't fight for the house or the savings. Her lawyer contacted mine with a simple message. She would take what the law required, nothing more. I almost laughed when I heard that. Even now she was trying to play the role of the dignified wife, as if dignity had any place in the ruins of our marriage. Eric's wife filed for divorce too. My documentation proved useful to her lawyer. a fact that gave me more satisfaction than I'd expected. Turns out Eric's pattern of infidelity cost him more than just his marriage. His company's board didn't appreciate the scandal, especially when his Tuesday afternoon lady turned out to be a client's wife. Last I heard, he was stepping down as CEO. Sometimes karma works faster than you'd think. The hardest part wasn't the legal meetings or the property division, it was the small moments. Finding one of Linda's earrings under the bed, the empty space in the medicine cabinet where her things used to be, the muscle memory of reaching for her hand while watching TV only to grasp empty air. Beth came by about a month after it happened. She brought coffee and an awkward attempt at conversation. "We all miss her," she said, then immediately looked like she wanted to take it back. "No," I replied, surprising myself with my calm. "You miss who you thought she was, so do I." That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just mourning my marriage, I was mourning an illusion. The Linda I'd loved for 30 years had never really existed. She was a character in a story we'd both been telling, and I'd been too busy being the faithful husband to notice the plot holes. I threw myself into work, finding peace in the simplicity of engines. Cars don't lie. They don't pretend to hate flowers while accepting them from someone else. When something's wrong with a car, you can diagnose it, fix it, make it run right again. People are messier. Sometimes they stay broken. One morning, about 2 months after everything fell apart, I walked into Belmont and Rose. Jenny was behind the counter, her smile fading when she recognized me. "Mr. Walker, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "It's okay," I said and meant it. "I'd like to order some flowers." Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the order form. What kind would you like?" "Sunflowers," I said. "The brightest ones you have?" She looked confused. For someone special?" "For my new apartment," I explained. "I'm moving next week, starting fresh. And you know what? I actually like flowers, always have. Funny how long it takes to admit something like that to yourself." I hung the sunflowers in my new kitchen window that evening, their bright faces turned toward the setting sun, reaching for light like they didn't know any other way to be. I thought about Linda, about Eric, about all the lies and secrets, about how much energy it must have taken to maintain that elaborate dance of deception. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the coast. There was a customer there, someone who'd seen my work and wanted me to restore their classic Mustang. It would take months, they'd warned, would require me to temporarily relocate. Perfect, I'd said. I needed a change of scenery. As I drove, I thought about patterns, how they can trap you if you're not careful, how sometimes the only way to break them is to burn everything down and start over. The sunflowers sat on my passenger seat, bobbing their heads with every turn. I'd brought them along, my first decoration for my temporary coastal home, not because they were a symbol of love or betrayal or anything complicated, just because I liked them, because they were bright and alive and completely, unapologetically themselves. Sometimes that's all you need to be.